Stray is a game for people who have Toxoplasma gondii. Did you know that there is a parasite that causes organisms to have an affinity towards cats? This isn't some Last of Us twist on the real-life cordyceps. This is actually real. The biological mechanism evolved for cats' prey to intentionally expose themselves to cats. The cats would then eat the prey, Toxoplasma gondii would reproduce, and the cats would defecate, and more cat prey would become infected through dirt, soil, and water. This is mutually beneficial because the cats get free food and the parasite gets a safe place to reproduce and an easy mechanism for spreading itself geographically. Humans can get this due to domesticating cats and eating animals that hang around farm cats. We are a dead-end host, but we simply still get the effect of being weirdly into cats. If you have Toxoplasma gondii, then simply put, Stray is the video game for you. So in some ways, this kind of reminds me of Goat Simulator or Power Washing Simulator. Take an unusual sim and mix it with arcadey elements. Stray does this, but it layers a decent enough narrative and spectacular setting on top. And what do I mean by blending simulation and arcade? Well, for example, you have a meow button. Yes, it has some functionality in the game, but for the most part, you are meowing for the sake of meowing. You can scratch stuff, you can play with balls, you can take naps on command, and of course you can step on people's keyboards and interrupt the simple pleasures of artificial life. None of this is necessary or particularly deep in terms of simulation. It's just there to enhance your roleplay. This is simply there for you to have fun. Stray is by far at its best when you are just goofing around as a cat, vibing through the story. If you don't like cats and the weird shit they do because they're cats, Stray is going to be far less compelling. So, is Stray a walking simulator? And I mean this seriously. I think calling it a pure platformer is just wrong. You can't control your jumps. They're all pre-calculated. So is there combat? Is there stealth? What's the deal here? Is this just a game where you kind of hold X to advance the next section? Well, weirdly, Stray is broken up into 3 core gameplay components: puzzle solving, combat, and stealth. And I say weirdly because you never do all 3 at once. There's always a laser focus on one before the concept is either completely abandoned or until puzzle section number 12. Puzzle solving is probably the most consistently used spice of gameplay. There's some light puzzles to solve, most of which took less than a minute for me. There are a few key components: barrels you can roll, planks you can push, rods which move when you jump on them, and these puzzles are built on mixed and matched up. They never get too crazy, but the mechanics of the tools at your disposal are explored to their fullest without being overused. Combat, on the other hand, is, well, extremely brief and simple. For about 20% of the game, you have a weapon which has a cooldown. You can avoid enemies during this cooldown and pretend you're playing Call of Duty Zombies to form that train of zombies and efficiently blast them all. And stealth is also used for probably less than 20% of the game. Towards the end, you can jump into boxes and use the environment to avoid enemies' cones of vision. And like I said, for the most part, these are just sterile sections. You'll solve a puzzle in a puzzle room, do combat in the combat room, and sneak in the sneaking room. And I guess that's probably my biggest disappointment of Stray's gameplay. In the 4 hours of runtime, they rarely expand on their ideas and certainly never blend them together. Combat and stealth never get a twist, and you never get to do all 3 at once. And that seems like wasted potential for what are ultimately decent systems on their superficial levels. Where the game does succeed is striking this balance between role-playing and good old-fashioned fun. So does the gimmick of playing as a cat land. The gimmick of playing as a cat never got old because the experience is so short. There's just enough weird cat things to do sprinkled in just often enough that the novelty never really wears off. I do wish the gameplay continued to push itself to new heights at times, and the controls are kind of meh considering how simple the gameplay is, but if a bunch of cats were designing this game, they wouldn't have it any other way. Chill vibes, light sim elements, shallow gameplay ideas that don't overstay their welcome. If Stray was a 15-hour game, I'd be much more critical of the gameplay, but as a short experience, I'd say it does exactly what it sets out to do. I think Stray pulled people in for two reasons. The setting and, well, the cat, and for good reason. Cats are hype, and the industry's last attempt at delivering a worthwhile cyberpunk world was, well, very disappointing. So let's just get a few nitpicks out of the way. I really think you should have been able to customize your cat. Like, this game begs for making either your current cat or a cat you once loved see a new adventure. I honestly feel like this is a really missed opportunity. And while we're on nitpicks, a quick note on performance. Unfortunately, this game suffers from the Unreal Engine 4 stuttering issue, which has plagued many games on PC ports. Basically, the shaders are compiled on the fly, so whenever a new effect or animation plays, the frame rate's going to dip the first time it's shown. Now, for a game like this, pre-calculated jumps, slow puzzle solving, and sipping up that catmosphere, it isn't really a huge deal, unlike a reflex-heavy game like, say, Elden Ring. But when you are in the meowment and your frame rate tanks, it does kinda suck. The sound is simply top tier, and the music is probably my favorite soundtrack of the year. For once, the music fits really well in the background of this particular video. It's kind of hard fitting songs from Resident Evil 8 into my Resident Evil 8 review. These songs are simply perfect. The music is chiptune, it is low-key, and it is perfect for the cyberpunk setting. And it doesn't stop at the music. The sound is also top tier. Atmospheric sounds like dripping water, paws pitter-pattering in puddles, and robot Simlish are just as important in providing a catmosphere as the visuals. And yeah, the setting of this game is amazing and puts CD Projekt Red's interpretation of a cyberpunk world to shame. Yes, things are much smaller in scale, but everything is so lived in and with such a rich history. The team behind Stray is not only delivering what you'd expect out of a cyberpunk world, but adding their own twist in terms of lore and additive touches, like the world being inhabited by anthropomorphic robots. Robots who, by the way, are extremely expressive and fun to interact with. I've never put much thought about how robots mimicking human behaviors would interact with a cat, but these reactions seem just about right at home. And these robots predominantly drive the story through a series of cutscenes. The story is nothing new. It treads familiar ground explored in both games, films, and books. There is particular influence from Nier Automata, but it is delivered quite well, and the story touches on free will, class struggle, climate change, and friendship in serviceable, if not groundbreaking ways. Hell of a solid video game story, but don't expect to be going on any Witcher-level side quests here. So Stray really delivers in its personality. Top-tier sound design, setting and art direction held back only by a solid story. If you like to soak it all in and live in the meowment, then Stray is for you. And honestly, for a sim game, soaking it all in is probably exactly what you're looking for. Stray has what might be the greatest density of video game references I've seen. For such a short experience, there are tons of callbacks. Some might be a bit clearer than others. Let's start with the most obvious and work towards references which may be a bit more up for debate. In Midtown, a poor soul used to own a fine establishment. That is, until they took a screwdriver to the knee. And yeah, this is obviously a callback to Skyrim.
Used to be an adventurer like you. Then I took an arrow in the knee.
While we're in this little hole in the wall in Midtown, this particular robot is actually a double reference. His name is Sojiro, which is the name of the Guardian in Persona 5, the owner of a cozy coffee shop. The Sojiro in this Stray universe owns a bar, but I'd say it's a neat and obvious nod. And while cats positively love boxes, the fact that it is a persistent stealth mechanic makes me sure that it is a Metal Gear Solid reference.
The cardboard box that you have is ideal for fooling your enemies. It's a very important tool for infiltration missions.
Really?
Of course. I can't begin to count the number of agents whose lives were saved by a cardboard box.
We've already talked a bit about how this game explores similar ideas to Nier Automata, and Pascal's village is almost perfectly recreated in Stray's ant village. There's also some dialogue comparison here too. In Sentinels, No Man's Sky, I mean, come on, same name, weird floaty drones. There are a few other references which seem less explicitly from the developers and more recognized influence on my part. They seem to be wearing their influence on their sleeve, so I thought they would be worth pointing out. B12 seems kind of like an obvious nod to the Zelda companion character like Navi, Minda, or Fi.
Listen!
They anchor in the world, helping fill out story cues and solve puzzles, and they can often lend a perspective that you as a cat might not have. And the level design reminds me a lot of The Last of Us Part 2. There's a seamless ebb and flow between open to linear. In Last of Us 2, you'll find yourself exploring Seattle's center city in a confined but branching space before being funneled down a linear story segment and locked out of the previous space. Stray works in a very similar way. You do some linear progression, make your way into the slums, and that process repeats about 3 times in a very similar cadence to The Last of Us Part 2. Where games often commit to linear or open, it's refreshing to see Stray continue a seldom used trend. And there are even a few movies and shows that get a wink and a nod, with Back to the Future probably getting the most direct references. There's a character called Doc who needs 1.1 gigawatts, and the character's son is dressed awfully suspiciously. There's even a subtle reference to the Gravity Falls Journal. And in real life, there's actually a few references as well, like how the game's city is inspired by the Kowloon Walled City, or how all the robots are repping Apple Macintoshes for heads. So, what are all these references about? Are they here just for fun? Do they represent more than just a wink and a nod? Well, Stray is heavily influenced by Nier, I can say that much. The explored themes, atmosphere, and even the story beats are directly connected, but the more direct references, like 1.21 gigawatts and Sojiro talking about taking a screwdriver to the knee, those to me seem more like the developers just calling out some of their favorite content. Maybe some of it was formative or served as an inspiration one way or another, but I don't think these references are meant to enrich the experience. When I started Stray, I was kinda worried. I really thought this game was going to turn out to be a mediocre walking simulator, because the game was holding its cards close to its chest. The more you play Stray, the better it gets. The more mechanics unfold, the more lore you uncover, the more locals you explore, and the more hip beats you get to vibe to. I really thought this game had the potential to be a catastrophe. But by the time I finished Stray, I really appreciated the time I was able to spend on all fours exploring the dank and decrepit dregs humanity has left behind. Stray is certainly worth your time, and while that time may be short at only 4 hours, some may feel shortchanged, but the presentation is worth the admission alone. This isn't a game for people looking to get good, but if you want to meow and nap, then Stray is the game for you.